And for those of you who would like to know much more about her, please look at the NCAP website and look up our wonderful participants in all that NCAP achieves. And Liz would be a big part of that, and it will give you her full background material. But today, I'm getting acquainted with Liz for the first time, although we realize that we've shared some interesting background together with agencies here in Southern California. Often when I'm introduced, Liz, I would like to be able to step up to the mic and say, don't talk about that, talk about this instead. And so for purposes of introduction, what would you like the folks who are looking at this interview, what maybe 5 things would you like them to know about your professional career that might be informative to who you are, and maybe what built your career in the present?
Okay, interesting question. 5 things. The most important thing is that I feel like even though adoption has always been part of my life, professionally, I feel like I just fell into it and didn't really understand what drove me early on. It was just like, oh, I'm going to work at a group home, or oh, I'm going to happen to go to Monterey County and develop an assessment program for kids in foster care and adoption, or and so that was, so one thing is that I always kind of fell into these situations early on without being purposeful in understanding how I got there and what fueled me. Second, professionally, is that my personal experience in adoption always fueled my passion and my drive to want to do better. I think early on, it was so early on in the kind of mid 80s when I started this work, and not really understanding. I don't think we were really talking about attachment, and we weren't talking about trauma, but just intuitively knew that what we were doing wasn't working. And that's what fueled me to go back to school and want to learn more about working with children, about trauma. I mean, I don't even know if we used those words back in those days. I just knew professionally I wanted to know more. And I felt like the only way to do that was to become a psychologist. I had no clue that maybe I could have stopped at my master's, or I didn't need to go that whole route. Just kind of understanding. So 5 things.
You don't have to do 5 things. It's up to you.
Yeah. So going to graduate school and then deciding I don't want to work with children, I want to work with adults, but that didn't last very long because I was always drawn back to children. And I think a lot of the path of my career was so unconscious that I didn't really understand what drove me until I was talking to a group of foster parents in Monterey County and went, oh, I live this life. And now I'm making a conscious choice to be in that profession and to help understand kind of what we don't understand, trying to help do better, trying to help the next generation of children and foster parents and adopted parents do better, because my parents didn't have those resources. And when I made those connections, that's what always drove my work in the adoption place, was I want to do better, and I want to have a voice for those children that didn't have a voice for so long.
That's really, it's so helpful. You kind of scaffolded, your movement through your career, and but you touched a couple times on the personal impact. How does it touch you personally, Liz?
And I might cry. This is emotional because I don't think I've ever really talked about it in a more public forum. I have 2 older, I had, unfortunately, 2 older sisters that were adopted by my parents, Lori and Elena. They were adopted in the early 60s. When the thought about adoption is that kids should feel very lucky to get out of the circumstances they were in. Elena was 5 years older than I was, and my sister Lori was 7 years older. I shared a room with my sister Elena, and I thought it was normal to talk about like what was life like before you came to live with mom and dad, because they were 4 and 6, I believe. And she would tell me stories like, well, we ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or we were left in our room and we didn't have a place to go to the bathroom, so we peed in the dump truck. And I just thought, I mean, at that point, you don't know that that's not normal.
Right.
And having those conversations with her, it was just kind of the normal thing. Like, what was life like before you lived with mom and dad? So that has a deep impact on me, because as you go in your career and you learn about the impact that this can have, it's always another layer, like, oh my gosh, the trauma. Oh my gosh, the trauma. And my parents were not equipped. They were not equipped in those days. There were very little resources out there. They felt that my sister should be lucky to get out of the bad circumstances, but not really understanding the loss and grief that they had to process or understand. I remember with my sister Lori, when she might get into arguments with my parents, that she would just get this glazed look, and that would frustrate my parents to no end. Like, she's just tuning us out. Well, now as a professional, you look and, oh my gosh, she was disassociating, I'm sure.
Right.
Disassociating for sure. So I think about my sisters all the time in this work. And I think about the impact they had on me, to continue to keep my foot in this work every day. They're my heroes. For sure. And the sad part of the story is I lost both of them. I just lost my sister Lori this past August.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Drugs, alcohol, unresolved trauma, a broken heart. And but that's what keeps me going. And that's what drives my passion professionally, and just want to make it a better place for those kids.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and for sharing your true emotion connected to that. You actually have answered another question, which is really what led you into the field. And I think clearly you're able to articulate that. You are where you are in dedication to your older sisters, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the time. And I do have an interesting story. When my younger sister, or my youngest older sister, Elena, passed from alcoholism back in around 2014. And I don't know if he'll even remember this conversation, but Michael Grand was working at Kinship probably the year before that. He was our visiting expert for a while. That's when I was at Kinship Center.
And he was doing his sabbatical so he could write his book on the constellation. Yeah.
Yes. But we had a conversation about him talking about the 8th core
mattering
issue, about mattering. And I took that, and it might have been like a 10-minute conversation at the most. And my sister Elena passed away shortly thereafter. And I knew she was passing, and she was on the East Coast, and I couldn't get to her just because of circumstances. So I wrote her a letter. And I told her I wanted to know that she mattered in my life.
Wow.
And they were able to read it to her. My niece was able to read it to her, and they buried that letter in her coffin.
Oh.
But it was really Michael that fueled that for me.
Yes. Yeah.
For sure.
And we included that in our book on the 7 core issues,
Yes.
because it was important. He's been a great influence on all of our lives. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing that. That's
Sure.
just really very moving and so relevant to the work that we all do. It's certainly what's kept me in the field for 60 years. So I really understand that. If we move away from your career for a minute, who are you outside of your career? What do you enjoy doing? What gives you the creative and fun aspects of your life?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm a wife and a mother of 2 children that are young adults, 21 and 24.
Wow. Okay.
And just really trying to get into that empty nester mode. My 21-year-old son lives with us, but he'll be out soon.
Okay.
I love to hike on the Central Coast. I love to swim. I try to swim 4 times a week. I think of that bilateral stimulation that needs to happen in order to. My husband and I love to go out to the desert and ride in our side by side. The desert and the ocean are very healing for me, and we live right by the water. So when we're not by the water, we're usually in the desert, just trying to recharge. And I love to travel when I'm able to. Haven't been able to do that as much in the last couple of years. But just in spending time with family and friends is what fuels me as well. So.
Oh, it sounds like a very full life and a balanced one, which is something that keeps us in our career long term, is having a balanced life.
I think right now I actually work for California Men's Colony State Prison, and I think in addition to everything else I'm doing, and you cannot work in a setting like that without really consciously taking care of yourself on it every day.
Do you find in that part of your work people connected to adoption and foster care who've ended up in the prison system?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would almost like 75% of the men that I talk to, there's been some trauma, or they've been in the foster care system or adoption. Absolutely. And I even said that in my interview because I had no experience working in the prison system, and circumstances, I just needed a little bit more consistency. And I'm like, and I told them, I said, unfortunately, the children that we see in the foster care system and adoption end up in prison, and the issues that they're dealing with are very similar. And that's how we kind of I segued for myself those 2 areas professionally.
That's an astounding percentage. Thank you for sharing that, Liz.
Right. And that's just kind of a ballpark figure, but for sure, that has impacted the prison system.
Well, someday you're going to get to retire, although I'm convinced none of us ever really do. I mean, I retired last year and here I am. So I think we're dedicated to this field, and think until we're gone. But when you do get to think about retirement, how would you like people to remember you? I mean, if you were going to write your obituary or have some words on a tombstone or whatever, or somebody was doing a eulogy to you, what would you want them to say about you and the time that you've spent in this field?
That she made an impact, that she made a difference in my life. Maybe it was just a moment, but she saw me.
You mattered.
You mattered.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've had a couple circumstances with children that I've worked with early on that have just circumstances have brought us together again, or even in a parking lot at Home Depot, or kids that I thought would maybe not make it, and they've reached across and said, Dr. Heidler,
Oh,
I'm here and I'm okay. And
oh,
that actually happened, or somebody reached out through LinkedIn or whatever and said, I'm okay. And I wanted you to know that I'm doing okay.
yeah. Oh, that is the reward
Mhm,
of the work and the heartbreak that
mhm,
we ourselves, our own vicarious trauma that can get triggered from all the trauma we work with. That's such a healing experience to have.
mhm.
So yes, I'm so glad that you have that, and it's a wonderful thing to know that when we're gone, that people can say they really mattered,
Mhm.
and I suspect for sure that you will. I think that
Thank you.
from everything that you're saying. Um, for people who are watching this interview, um, what do you hope about the outcomes of your work? I think you've touched on it a little bit. And how might you serve them? Why might somebody give you a call and say, I really need some advice from you, Dr. Heidler? So your goals and outcome, and then how you might serve other people interested in talking to you.
Um, I think the real impact as a psychologist, and I have a unique, people like data. Um, and unfortunately, something that reaches them on the paper, and that's why I continue to do these psychovals. Not necessarily because I need to do them, because I could tell exactly what's going on before even doing the testing, but but really giving somebody, putting their story on paper and shifting the perception that the adoptive parent or foster parent has regarding their child. And
Wow.
and connecting that with real data has is how I utilize the psychovals. If it's just to shift the perception that the child, this is how he's processing information, or this is how, or this is, some of his emotional um, feelings that are going on, and the lens that you need to look through it, a different lens that you can look through it, is helpful to shift the perception that the adoptive parent or foster parent may have about this child. And it's in a concrete document. So every psychoval is actually a story.
Oh, it's beautiful.
um, for that person, for that child to have, like, somebody finally has my whole story on paper,
Yes.
or for that adopted parent to have and to read again and to be reminded of why these behaviors are occurring. And so just to give the person a different lens to see the child through again, I guess.
That is just a wonderful, wonderful reinterpretation of the testing that we asked for and what it can serve. Because what you're doing is building not only a different view, kind of like
Mhm.
turning the kaleidoscope, but you're building
Mhm.
compassion and understanding, and
Absolutely.
underneath that, attachment. So
Absolutely.
yes, it's such a powerful thing that you're doing. Thank you for sharing that. Um, my goodness, that's just, I wish every psychologist doing testing would think about it in that way, that it's not just a series of numbers. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think my psychovals are so long, people I think they get tired of reading, but just to make sure everything's covered.
and if somebody wanted to chat with you, they watched this and they thought, oh my gosh, I really like this professional. I'd like to learn from them. Do you what kinds of consulting do you do with, how do you take what you know and do so well and spread it to others?
Usually I'm asked. I don't put myself out there. But usually people find me, and right now it's mostly in San Luis Obispo County.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm so glad they have you, and I'm so glad we have you here in California.
Thank you.
Yes. Um, You know, if you look at the NCAP website, it says that it's about connecting, strengthening, and empowering. What drew you as to NCAP as a member? Why did you choose to be a consultant to this organization?
The real answer is that Carol Biddle asked me
Okay, all right.
early
So
on.
somebody you respected approached
Somebody
you.
that I respected.
Okay.
And I'm always like, no, me? No, really. And I think it was right as she was just retiring from Kinship Center and was telling me what her next plans were. And she's like, I'm going to do this new thing. And I'm like, yeah, sure, Carol, because that's what happened when you told me the clinic was happening. And that's how she drew me into working in Salinas in the mental health clinic. And actually, that was Carol Bishop Moore. But anyway, yeah, it was just being asked and me saying, sure. Not even really knowing. And I haven't really been, in all honesty, haven't been a real active member of NCAP. But that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the work that's being done and everybody that's involved. So,
well, we need more of you because clearly you have some very clear perspectives on what needs to happen for both children and the adults who serve them. So I'm encouraging you to speak up more because you have a richness to offer. Any last thoughts for somebody that's watching this that maybe I haven't asked you or touched on that you'd really like them to know?
I mean, I think we're all in this together, and I think we're all still learning. And to be part of this field that's changed so much. I just have a lot of gratitude that we've gotten this far and I've been able to see it. But I still think we're continuing to learn. And adoption and trauma and attachment. I'm learning so much of how that's impacted even in our prison system. And while we've made leaps and bounds of all this work, we need to keep moving forward.
Yes. And that's certainly my prayer for NCAP, that it keeps that focused and uses its consultants to move the needle, because we are always learning, aren't we? And and it's so important to be able to share that knowledge with each other. I am absolutely thrilled to have done this interview with you. I feel like I've discovered a whole new person.
Thank you.
And I really am loving the way that you represent the work that you do, and would love to be able to kind of tout your skills out there. And so thank you, because you gave us a lot of time and attention, and appreciate all that you're doing. So thank you, Liz.
I'm sorry I wasn't more prepared, and I hope I answered some.
You were beautifully prepared. You know, all you have to do is know yourself and your own field and thoughts. So the questions were just prompts, but you did a beautiful job, and I thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you for interviewing me, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful holiday season coming up.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.